Good evening. So about a year ago, I realized I had also done a startup. I've done several startups on the side, but the main one I had done, and for 30 years I hadn't realized it had been a startup in all different respects. Back then, actually, we didn't talk in those terms. So I think I have either I'm very lucky, which I am. I married a great lady, etc. Moved to a great country. But I do have a super ability or superpower, I think, that somehow I've been able to attract amazing teams. And certainly, that's the Riga Stock Exchange is an example of that. And tonight we have a small reunion. I have 3 awesome members that helped start the Riga Stock Exchange 33 to 30 years ago. So Uldis Cerbulis, who was the second president, I was the first one. Martin Šrikšis, do I see Martin? Yeah. And who was head of the Central Depository, Roberts Edelsons, who, see, people that have gone on and done even bigger and better things, but I was able to. They somehow came to this project, and we together did something really, I think, for us it was very, very interesting, and I think it's something very important for the country as well. So the Riga Stock Exchange today is NASDAQ, and I've just highlighted from their webpage what it is, what they define it is, but what I've highlighted are the specific words that will reoccur several times through this presentation. So it's a regulated market. It's open and efficient. It's licensed and supervised. These are all very, very important terms because just starting up a stock exchange and the algorithm, which is what we imagine it is actually probably the easiest part. It's really the most difficult part, and the challenge is establishing the whole ecosystem that is required in a capital markets. So when we talk about starting the stock exchange, it really wasn't just starting a stock exchange. It was establishing the ecosystem in Latvia, which allowed the stock exchange to operate. So these are numbers from last year. I think also thanks to Roberts, we are finally doing quite well in bonds, but we severely are behind our Baltic neighbors in the market capitalization and shares. Many reasons for that, but I'm hoping that your companies will help change this in the near future. So there's been 5 presidents of the stock exchange. Myself, I was the first, and Uldis, Gunters. So the first 3 are LatBAN members, and now it's up to you to convince the other 2 to become your members as well. Daiga was the longest serving member. So what is a stock exchange? Again, the same words come up. It's a regulated marketplace. This I asked Gemini to tell me in two sentences. It's centralized hub and fair, orderly, and transparent manner. All very, very important terms. I've also added that it's typically a privately owned monopoly or oligopoly that serves as a public good or provides a public good. So stock exchange is the part on the top. The one we see, the one we talk about, the one that's interesting to everybody, but it actually rests on the whole ecosystem holding it up, which of course is legislation, which is important. From legislation, we get the regulation. We need a broker system. We need products, shares, and bonds. We need, of course, investors. Very importantly, we need a central depository. Also, that would be, there were 2 legal entities that we established, which was the stock exchange on top and the central depository on the bottom. Central depository is the back office for a regulated securities market. It's I would say it's probably more important, and it should certainly come first, even before the stock exchange for a country. So in 1993, when we started, none of this existed in Latvia. And in 20 short months, we were able to help put all of that in place. This is the scheme on our first day of trading, which we distributed, how the system works. As you see, we have two central entities, both of which we established. But there's many arrows going back and forth, and all of those arrows need to be working in any of for the whole system to work. So again, it's what we know is, what we look at is just the numbers coming out of the Riga, the middle part, the stock exchange, but it's really the whole environment that needs to be functioning together. And as I mentioned, the central depository, a critical piece of a securities market. It's where the securities are recorded. It's where the main accounts for the different brokers are held, and it provides a settlement service. So if you don't have good settlement, if you don't trust that when you sell a share that you'll get funds, or that your money will go toward getting the shares, the system doesn't work. So what were the early 1990s like? I would say very, very different than today. A little bit quaint, perhaps, in the technology. Back then, we were using the most modern technology that was available. We did have computers, of course, but we communicated with floppy disks. I think the greatest challenge we faced technologically was the first part, that today we have very easy access to information. Google, AI, internet, etc. Back then, it really took a long time to find out the information, whether you got it from a book or calling somebody, or talking to somebody, newspapers, etc. So information flow back then took a lot longer. The learning process took a lot longer. And that's something now today that we, of course, take for granted. Latvia was much bigger in a population back then. So we've lost a significant part of the population. What happened? Talk to your spouse. We can talk about that. On the other hand, we are a much, much richer country. People may not agree, but we are. Before the Soviet Union collapsed, and these are nominal dollars, these are not inflation adjusted, so the graph wouldn't be as steep if it was inflation adjusted, and even less steep if it was purchasing power parity basis. But nevertheless, I mean, the numbers still show the trends. So in '93, Latvia probably was at its lowest point ever for many, many generations, because the Soviet Union collapsed, and our GDP per person was only about $1,000 at that time. Today, it's about $23,000. Again, not inflation adjusted, et cetera, but we are a much wealthier, much more normalized country. But we started operating back then. Yeah, organized crime was an issue. Of course, it's an issue today, but it's something that fortunately we never directly faced, but we did take it into consideration. We had systems and contacts to make sure that it never approached us. I can recommend this great LatBAN movie from last October. It's with English subtitles. Watching it, you really will get the flavor on what the early 90s were like. Okay, it's a little exaggerated, but it's a very, very true representation of the 1990s. Probably the biggest thing we had to fight was general disinformation and ignorance, which is understandable coming out of the communist system. People did not have experience. People had not traveled. People they had read something and exaggerated that. There were a number of stock exchanges in name, established in the early 90s by some politicians, by also some shady characters. When we took the stock exchange building over in 1994, we found in one of the former offices boxes of these Soviet gas masks. So, it's interesting times. I don't know, how they expected to be trading that. Banking system. Latvia went through a very, very tough bank crisis in 1995, where over 40% of the deposits in the country were lost through failed banks. The biggest bank was Bank Baltia, and this occurred exactly at the time while we were starting up the stock exchange and had our first days of trading. That's a president and the main owner on the right of Bank Baltia, which is the largest bank. So every other family lost money during this banking crisis. And the Russian army was still in Latvia, and it only left in August of 1994. Latvia was late in setting up an organized securities market. Of course, it was easier for the countries like Poland and Hungary, etc., that were independent countries and weren't part of the Soviet Union, but even Vilnius had set up a stock exchange in 93 while we only opened trading in 1995. Tallinn was a little bit after us, but of course it quickly overtook us in trading volumes. So how did we do it? I came to Latvia in 1993 to consult banks. Quickly realized that the banks I was consulting with, that they would sooner or later not survive because they were pocket banks. And when this idea of the stock exchange occurred, I pivoted over to that project. I don't have a background in the regulated securities market, but I do have a background in general management, in finance, in banking. So I was the one-eyed king in the land of the blind, but so was our whole team as we quickly learned what we had to do. Our initial founders were banks, and actually our shareholders were banks. So this was a 100% private process. However, had we not set it up, then somebody would have needed to do it, and it would have had to been either the finance ministry or the privatization agency or both, but probably several years later. So there were 4 founding banks, and as luck would have it, 2 of them already were bankrupt by the time we opened, as well as I think a lot of our founding banks went bankrupt. So why did the banks participate, which was at that time a reasonably sizable investment? For them, they saw the benefit of an organized capital market, and they wanted to offer brokerage accounts, which they do now. So in the 1960s, in the US, there was the hippie era. There was a saying, don't trust anybody over 30. So it wasn't an official motto that we had. And here we are in our hippie garb for a stock exchange. So here's our young team, together with the supervisory board from the banks. So the older people are almost all from the banks. I was the only person for a while over age 30 on our team. And
it's not Borat on the right.
I'm sorry? Do we know? Do we know? So we had supervisory board meetings once a month. and each bank had represented a board member on the on the team, on these board meetings. We had to prepare a lot, we had to present a lot. They were quite grueling, but it was a good way for us to communicate with our shareholders. Also, our shareholders would be the ones that would be handling these brokerage accounts, to communicate with them, to get their feedback, etc. So it was communication was absolutely key for our whole process. I think we got lucky on this. Maybe not everybody agrees, but very soon after we legally founded the stock exchange, December 1993, I read that the Paris Stock Exchange had provided startup technical consulting for Warsaw Stock Exchange and Vilnius Stock Exchange. So knowing all this disinformation, knowing all this ignorance, all this, the fog that we had to fight, I realized that if we had a reputable outside entity that provided consulting for us and backed us up, that we could cut through a lot of that. And it turned out to be true. I was quite surprised that the Paris Stock Exchange was so forward-looking. Also, second thing I was surprised about that our official language was English, which remember France at that time wasn't that favorable toward the English language. And in one way, they were excellent consultants. I expected them to come and deliver us a ready-made template. So here, just implement this, and often we'd be off and running. But they didn't. They forced us. They said, "Okay, these are the goals. These are the parts that you need. Now figure it out." Of course, they did provide us technical consulting. They did provide us some examples. They certainly helped set up the guardrails for us, but we had to figure it out. We had to figure out all of our rules, our algorithm, the law, etc. So honestly, it was a good learning experience for us, and much more meaningful for the whole setting up the whole process. They had a full-time young person here. This is all on their account. They travel to Latvia fairly frequently, and we travel to Paris at least twice, if not 3 times, together with the Ministry of Finance, together with our brokers, who was part of the whole learning process. And this happened in a very short time frame. We only established this partnership in summer of 1994. So, and within 12 months, we had a stock exchange up and running with all of the systems, the law, companies, brokers, training, etc. They really kept us to a short time frame. I would have thought they would have let us open a lot later, because at the time we opened, there were very few publicly traded companies, but we knew they were coming down the pipeline. Anyway, so this is, we visited several times the stock exchange in Paris, very useful. Maya Kubli is a lady in the middle with the blonde hair from the finance ministry. Together with her and her team, we helped write the law on securities, the first one in Latvia, all during the same time period. So what's happening in Latvia is also this privatization voucher program. So it was a program that Latvia did not invent, but it borrowed the whole process or idea. I think the Czech Republic, it was the most popular there, then Russia, and probably several other countries implementing something similar. So each individual in Latvia got this privatization certificate booklet. Each of you got a number of privatization vouchers, and you could buy them, you could sell them, you could gift them, you could privatize your flat, but you also could participate in the market for company shares that were going through privatization. So exactly parallel to us, this was going on with the privatization agency. So had we not established the stock exchange and the securities market and the laws and the rules and regulations at that time, I would imagine it would have been the responsibility of the privatization agency to do that because they were taking these companies through this public privatization. I don't know how many, I think probably 100 companies went through that process. For the stock exchange, it was essential because it gave us a product to trade. Some of those companies never should have come on the stock exchange, but that didn't hurt. They had zero or no turnover. Some companies were sizable and important. We as a stock exchange helped the privatization agency develop the bidding system for the vouchers. And Roberts, I remember, was designing the algorithm of that, helping design the algorithm of that. For that, fortunately, the privatization agency started paying us a regular fee, which allowed us to survive. So it was a real startup. And that cash flow was always short. We helped write the law on securities in Latvia. Law was enacted, we helped get it through the parliament, and it was enacted just several months before the start of the stock exchange. So we already had set a date for the stock exchange with no law, with no licensing of anybody. So we helped set up the law. Then we had to apply for licensing. Then we had to make sure that Central Depository was recognized as the place for clearing and settlement. So this is all done also within the 20-month time period. One thing that was critical, again, to cut through this fog of ignorance and disinformation was training. Training, public relations, media, nonstop. This was a broker training session, for example, in the stock exchange. On top is Jānis Naglis from the privatization agency and Iveta Vanaga from our head of PR at that time. So all these individuals and the whole system was trained under our guise. Media, I was constantly being put in front of the press, including the international press. Again, it was important for education purposes of the country. Again, it was very important to cut through this fog and disinformation. We took over this lovely building in 1994. It's the Stock Exchange building. It was opened in 1856, survived 2 fires. I had this amazing office, the best office in Latvia up here. So Uldis did as well then. But it was absolutely cold and freezing in the winter time and hot in the summer. But hey, you have to pay for beauty, you know. It was important for us to get management of this building, even though it wasn't critical at all for the operations of the stock exchange. But it was important for us to cement our legitimacy, because when we took over the stock exchange building, then it was clear we are the stock exchange. So that was both important for the country and also for potential foreign partners and investors.
It's funny that sometimes startups, when they raise money, get funding, one of the red flags is to get an office, a bigger one or something like that.
Yeah. This we definitely didn't need it, and the stock exchange is not located in the building anymore, of course. Now it's wonderfully renovated by the state and turned into the Museum of Foreign Art. So our first day of trading, this is our turnover, 186 lats. And actually, it was my money. Insider trading, I admit. We had about 4,000 on trading of the T-bill. I don't think that was my money, but we made sure that one of the banks traded. So totally minuscule, means nothing, but it was very important to get it going. And so, if it had been up to me, I would have waited maybe half a year. The Paris board said, no, get going. And it was absolutely right. And that's, I think, many startups go through that experience, getting going early. So the trading was 1 time per week. It wasn't live trading. You brought in your diskettes with the orders, and then it was an algorithm that matched it. It was a big event, attended by the politicians. Maris Gailis, our prime minister, he spoke, and then the French ambassador, and we got this historic bell from the stock exchange. We had the parliamentarians, the ambassadors there, the international press was there. But an example of our technology, you know, the results we wrote on a whiteboard in front of everybody. So, but it worked. So this is a French ambassador, you know, it's in the press in the background. So it was a big thing for Lavi, especially going through such a bad time with this this banking crisis. So something positive. So the job was done. Well, we kind of thought so, because the second trading session the following week, on Tuesday, it's 10 o'clock, supposedly I went to see where the employees are on a trading time, and they were at lunch. I think the second trading session, that was also mostly my money. Then I probably started not paying attention to it, and so we had a couple of sessions, 0 turnover. That's not very encouraging. But you know what? By August, and I think this August number, that's actually real turnover. So something started percolating. And by end of 1995, that same year, so we had 17 listed companies all coming through the voucher privatization, 23 trading sessions, so 1 time a week again, and market capitalization, it's a number. It was a real number. In '96, I thought I would be running the stock exchange for a long time. It was a really interesting job, as you could imagine, but NCH Capital hired me away and then gave the opportunity for Uldis. And I think it probably was not a bad thing, that I possibly would not have taken as many brave steps and bold decisions as a newer blood did. So what's in the future? I think it's actually a good place for your companies to be trading shares and bonds. And I think it's a great place for a trampoline to go to other stock exchanges in the future if your companies grow. So I do hope that you or those companies consider that. And the fact that it's part of NASDAQ, it gives it an immediate global presence. So that's the story, but I'll ask Uldis maybe, and then Roberts, and then Martin, just a couple words what they remember of this experience.
Round of applause.
Well, I'm going to be very short, because jumping into Kārlis' shoes was very difficult, not least because at that time I was 25 years old. I recall a couple of interesting moments, but I think the most dramatic moment was when I think it was in around maybe 99, when it was winter, quite gloomy weather, approximately like today, and of course the stock exchange had depended on revenues from the privatization agency for different services, but we were not really covering 100% of our expenses. And I was just walking around and thinking, how can we earn more money, and is there any objective need for a stock exchange? And then I came to the conclusion, no, and that's a very important lesson. There is no objective need for any company. If you can't make money, you should not exist. And then we kind of, together with the other team members, like our CFO at that time, Guntaras Kokorevich, and others, basically concluded that the only way to survive is to become a part of a bigger ecosystem, and that's why we started negotiations with the largest exchange group at that time, which was known for its aggressive nature in terms of acquisitions of the OM group, and the OM had zero interest in us, but we prepared the stock exchange for basically selling it to a mature exchange. And that transaction materialized 1 year after I left, when the stock exchange was sold to the Hex Group, the Finnish exchanges, and then paradoxically the Hex Group was taken over by the same OM, and then it was merged into Nasdaq in step 3. But I don't want to take more of your time. I can just say that, for me, from a perspective of a person who has basically given up academic career in Sweden to work, for the Kārlis team, it was a fantastic management team. It was a fantastic management by Kārlis, still one of the persons I most admire for his sound advice and way of doing things. And also I would say that almost every single member of the team who worked together with Kārlis, or later myself, or then later with Guntars Kokorevich, who succeeded me, have had a great career. And I think if Robert speaks next, he can tell something about that. That to me means that if a company has a purpose, which we had, because I think that was a very strong feature of Riga Stock Exchange, we had a purpose, we had a talent, but also fundamentally we had a quite good time. Maybe that is for the next presenters. Thank you.
I'm really grateful to Kārlis, because when I came to the stock exchange, I think it was like I was on the third course in the University of Latvia, like studying finance and credit or something. And and I was looking for a job, and then basically, actually, I was interviewed by a couple of banks, which later went bankrupt, and they didn't accept me as a candidate. But Kārlis somehow managed to see some potential, and yes, for which I'm still very, very grateful, because this whole project was extremely exciting for all of us, and for me in particular, because I was more on the technical side, so I was not aware of all the big dealings with the privatization agencies, the government, and etc. But yes, from the technical side and from the sort of creativity side, this was extremely good lessons learned. Because back at the time, nobody knew what the securities are in essence, and in the end of the day, the stock exchange and the first brokers who started to trade on the stock exchange were the ones who possessed at least some knowledge about securities, how the stock market and bond market operates, and that was a really great learning curve. No, I think now we are in a very great stage of development of what we all have started like 20-something years ago, 21 years ago. 30. Yeah. 30, right, exactly. So I think the future is bright, and I'm very optimistic. I was very optimistic when I worked at the stock exchange. I was very optimistic when I worked in one of the banks, which was a very active member of the stock exchange. And I'm very optimistic now when I'm running the bank, which is the most active bank on the stock exchange again. But now I'm much more professional, than compared to that time. So that's why I have all the experience and from which Kārlis and the team gave me. So thank you very much.
Okay. Anyway, thanks to remind that it's 30 years, not 20. And therefore I have to confess some things, and 30 years passed, and I suppose that the statute of limitations has officially expired. So we had no money when we started stock exchange, and to be more precise, we had no money enough to establish such type of stock exchange that would later become part of Nasdaq. And if you don't have money, you pitch. And so we went to banking industry, and basically we said, trust us, we are younger than 30, and so it's going to be big deal. So therefore, I suppose that secret is also that Kārlis stressed on public communication and building public image of new stock exchange very early. And it means if you don't have money, you still can communicate with investors, you can pitch, have a nice pitching event.
All right, maybe I can ask Kārlis to come back on stage. We have some time maybe for some open questions that you may have. For me, I was very surprised to hear that you were able to establish all of the processes in the 20 months, which seems quite rapid when you take a look at some startups that actually develop for years and years and years.
This going through this process of making this presentation, I hadn't looked at the photos, I hadn't looked at the materials for over 20 years. So, and then I said, okay, how long did it take us? And 20 months, I can't believe it either. But you know, it's the times, you know, create the people, as it were. And I think all of us, you know, had we not gone through this amazing experience, I think, you know, we'd still be successful. But I would imagine we may not be, you know, in those positions that we haven't ended up, or some may even still move forward from here. So, yeah, the time was extremely short. But I think that's true of a lot of startups. You know, it's you do what's important.
Questions, answers, yes?
Yeah, just wanted to ask, we see that the capitalization is not small right now. What is needed for this stock exchange to become at least the size of Stockholm?
Size of Stockholm, well, it's of course companies, of course. You know, there's.
And what stock exchange can be?
You know, success has many fathers and failure is an orphan. So in that respect, it's an orphan. But I think there's many reasons why we're not where we are. I also saw a lot of good companies go through the stock exchange and become delisted. For example, SEB Bank. Unibanka. You know, it could have stayed on the stock exchange. But it was, so the good companies in many cases were bought by foreign entities and taken off the stock exchange. You know, Staborad's a cookie and cake manufacturer, and that was delisted. Balta Insurance, which, you know, NCH was an investor, and then we publicly listed it, and then half a year later, it was purchased by a foreign insurance company. So that's one of the reasons. The other is that I think Latvia has, the government maybe was not courageous enough to offer some of the bigger companies to take to the stock exchange. I don't know, it's been painful. But, you know, Latvia's third in many things, unfortunately. In anything, in real estate and
But what exactly the stock exchange can do to make Latvia an alluring place for the companies to start? What's in your power, let's say?
well, my power, I'm not in the stock exchange, fortunately, so my power would be to take companies, if, you know, we made investments and then take companies into the stock exchange. That's in our total power. So that's why I'm saying I think it is a good place to list. Without enough companies, you know, publicly traded, it just that capitalization won't grow. I think, you know, the infrastructure is there. Now the investors are in there. Actually, you know, there's quite a bit of cash in the Baltic states, even though, you know, it used to be that we expected foreign investors to come to the Baltic states and invest, and that's how it started, you know, 30 years ago. But today it's, I don't know, Robert, what's your feeling? Probably, I would guess it's 80% plus is Baltic investors.
It's local money.
Yeah, it's local money, but we have a lot of it, it turns out. You know, it would be nice, on a political sense, it would be nice that our pension funds, which have accumulated, you know, billions, that, you know, they would be forced more to invest in your companies, and those companies hopefully would grow, you know, and then end up on the stock exchange. So that positive, positive wheel of successful companies just hasn't gotten going in Latvia, unfortunately. We're late. We're very late.
We had a question over here.
I'm just really curious. How did it actually work in those times? I would imagine like you walk up into the building,
Yep.
with some cash,
No.
put it on the table, you give some sort
No,
of
no.
receipt.
It all happened through the brokerage accounts. It's exactly from day one to today. There's not much difference. So the.
But it was not like computers and stuff like that.
Yeah. It was the banks were computerized back then too, but we didn't have the emails and we didn't have that type of communication. But it's it wouldn't be that much different except the fact that you went to a branch at that time. You would go to a banking branch and you would open up a brokerage account, like today you would do at Swedbank on internet. It was all digitalized. It was that. Things have gotten faster and better and easier, but it was all there from day one in the process. But the most important part of that process that was all regulated. It was licensed brokers, managed by or overseen at that time. I think the Ministry of Finance. Then it was Fuktuk, which all this managed for a while, and then it's now the Bank of Latvia that regulates and oversees all of that. Yeah, so no difference from that day to today, except on the speed of things.
All right. If no more questions, then thank you very much.
Thank you.